this video of Howie Hawkins talking about Jill Stein, talking about Russiagate, about Syria. Listen, man. People need to understand something when they're weeding out candidates, whether they're progressives or Green Party. Matter of fact, I would say especially if they're portraying themselves as further to the left of the Democratic Party and therefore better. Okay, show us. Because, they'll tell you, oh, yeah, I support Medicare for all. Okay. Green New Deal. Great. Wonderful. And what about the foreign policy? What about the empire? You realize you're running for office in the world's foremost superpower, only hyperpower. So foreign policy is the issue, if not anything else. And they always ignore this, whether we're talking about Palestine or whether we're talking about the conflict that the United States has started in the Middle East. They just don't even address these things. And I'm sick of that. So first thing I do when I hear about a candidate or when I want to look up more about them, I look up the foreign policy. I check what they've said about Syria, Iran, Venezuela. I want to know where they stand. Are they going to spout the same nonsense as Dick Cheney? Or am I going to hear something fresh? So, first of all, if you look up Howie Hawkins, he'll tell you, okay, we shouldn't get involved and end the wars. Great. That sounds great on paper. The problem is, when you listen to him in this video, talking about Jill Stein, talking about her attending this conference in Moscow, and then talking about Syria, red flags all over the place, man. So look, first of all, when it comes to Russiagate, the guy was saying that he advised Jill Stein not to go to this climate conference in Moscow because it would look bad somehow. And, he was essentially saying, like, I told you so, because after she attended, Putin managed to sit at the same table. Oh my God, he's kind of the president, and, they attend public functions. Crazy, right? So because Putin managed to sit down at the same table as Jill Stein, Hillary Clinton and the rest of the neoliberal establishment, to discredit her, they started saying that she's a Russian agent and all this garbage nonsense. And so, he was kind of like holding this, well, I told her so, and, Russia hacked the elections, just pushing the whole Russiagate nonsense. And on top of that, he starts spouting the same CIA talking points about Syria, and this is where it goes over a lot of people's heads, like they don't even realize what's going on here, because when it starts out as, okay, end the wars, but at the same time, all of these countries in the global south that won't bend the knee to the United States, they're run by dictators and human rights violations and international law and this and that, the same old cassette, the same tape, right? The same record that you've heard a million times. The one that they use for all kinds of regime change, right? The same one you hear when it comes to Gaddafi, when it comes to Saddam, when it comes to Maduro, when it comes to Morales, when it comes to North Korea, when it comes to Syria. The same fucking cassette. He starts repeating it.
There was another article that just came out the other day saying a lot that Russophiles are supporting her. And it seemed, obviously her meeting with Assad years ago has been a big point of contention as well. So just overall, I'd be interested, what are your thoughts on the Tulsi Gabbard campaign?
I haven't looked closely at it. To call her a Russophile, that's guilt by association. She's for staying out of foreign wars. She's in the military. She's a reserve officer. And anybody that takes that position is going to be accused of being soft on somebody. So I don't, take any of that. Her meeting with Assad, I wouldn't have done that. In fact, that was another offer that Jill got, and she didn't do it.
Really?
On our advice, yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
When did she get that invitation?
2015. And, to go with a delegation under control of the Assad regime is, that is for their purposes. You're not going to, particularly in the middle of a civil war, you're not going to be able to find out what's really going on and interview the other side.
Right.
So I think she was.
Well, it's kind of like the Jane Fonda thing back in Vietnam, right? I mean, it's going to be used as propaganda. You're not really.
Well, I would say much worse to go to Syria under the circumstances with Assad. I mean, this guy's a butcher. He tortured that Canadian engineer, Syrian Canadian, on behalf of the CIA. And, New York Times last week had a story, And Democracy Now! Had the reporters of documentation. There are over 100,000 political prisoners, tens of thousands dead in this country and tortured. It's brutal. So yeah, that would not have been a good one to take.
And that's always the precursor. That's always what comes right before regime change. So he'll tell you, yeah, I'm against the wars. Of course. What do you think? I'm a warmonger? No, I'm against the wars. I don't want wars. But you know, those Arabs, oh, they're brutal. Oh, they're committing human rights violations. And then what comes next? We got Obama. We had no choice. But because look, the human rights violations, they're brutal dictators. It's the same propaganda that they use to justify the regime change, to justify the imperialism, to justify the oppression against the global South. And it's not just the wars, because a lot of voters, they think that if you say end the wars, it's enough. No, it's not enough. There are people in Venezuela starving to death. There are people in Iran starving to death. Syria is going to starve to death because of these new sanctions. What about sanctions? No one ever asks these politicians about sanctions. You think sanctions don't kill? You think siege warfare, which is what it is essentially, doesn't kill people? It doesn't hurt civilians? It especially hurts civilians. The ruling class, the political elites in these countries that are targeted for regime change, they're not hurt by sanctions to the same degree as their civilian population. They don't starve to death. Where is your opposition to sanctions? You think that's okay? No, it's not. That's still oppression. That's still imperialism. That's still meddling in other countries. Why are you repeating the same CIA, DOD talking points that are used to justify regime change? Mind your fucking business. If you say we shouldn't get involved, that means you keep your mouth shut too and stop brainwashing other people. That's what it means, right? And the United States, remember, they got no problem getting in bed with dictators if they're from Saudi Arabia. They got no problem with violating human rights if Israel does it. They got no problem, propping up armed opposition groups in Latin America and death squads to overthrow governments and commit genocide if they're in bed with Uncle Sam. This is hypocrisy, not to mention it's none of your fucking business to be getting involved in countries in the global South. These countries have been under oppression and colonization for hundreds of years. They've had enough. They've had enough. And so this is very concerning when you hear them repeating the same shit. And Bernie Sanders does this. AOC is essentially de facto repeating the same thing when she says, I defer to party leadership, which means what? Nancy Pelosi, right? Chuck Schumer. And what do they say? The same shit. This is an issue. For me, this is an issue. When I ask someone who's supposedly on the left about foreign policy, I don't want to hear the same thing that Dick Cheney and George Bush and Colin Powell and Hillary Clinton would tell me. Because if I do, that's a big fucking issue. That's a really big red flag. And once again, what do we have? Cohesion. And so when it comes to going to war, when it comes to maintaining the US empire, guess what? The Green Party will also be there because there is no real fucking left. This is not an option. This is not okay, man. This is not okay. And this is precisely how you weed out candidates. This is precisely how you tell apart the real ones from the bullshitters. And unfortunately, I've yet to see a real one. All right? Every single one of them is on board with Zionism, with the genocide of Palestinians. They're on board with sanctions. They're on board with regime change. They don't say it explicitly, but they say it implicitly by either repeating these talking points or simply refusing to do anything and grow a fucking spine. Unacceptable. You are managing the largest empire in history. You are effectively strong-arming, not just former colonies of Western powers in the global South. You are not just strong-arming them, but you are also strong-arming your allies. You are dictating world affairs. You don't get to make foreign policy a side issue. It's the issue. And your silence makes you complicit with genocide and oppression and tyranny and colonization. That's what it does. All right? So I don't, when I ask someone from the Green Party about Syria, I don't want to hear Hillary Clinton coming out of their fucking mouth. Fuck you. That's it, man. So you can't trust these people. No matter how good they say they are, or how nice they look on paper with their policies, not one of them stands up to U.S. hegemony. Not one. Not a single one. They are all complicit. They are all helping to maintain this U.S. empire. They are all helping to maintain this predatory foreign policy, this militarism, this occupation that spans decades and decades, the exploitation, the murder of countless civilizations and countries in the global south. Afghanistan, Venezuela, Syria, Libya, Somalia, Sudan. Look at what they did to Southeast Asia in the Cold War, to Vietnam, to Indonesia. It never stops. It never stops. And they always pretend to have the moral high ground. That's the whole key. That's the whole game. That's how they do the propaganda, right? It's like, oh, we don't want war. Of course not. We want peace and stability. But you people are so violent that we have to step in and occupy you for like 20 years. There's always a but. There's always a but. There's always, we have to get involved. We know better. We are going to dictate who is morally superior. We are going to determine who gets regime change and who doesn't. No. Who gave you this right? Go and fuck yourself. So I don't want to hear it from Republicans. From neocons. I don't want to hear it from neoliberals, and I don't want to hear it from the Green Party. Sure as hell don't want to hear it from the Green Party. What, are you going to drop green bombs? Do you think that makes it any better? Am I losing my mind? And no one pays attention to this. They just give them passes. Like, oh yeah, he's the Green Party. Oh yeah, awesome. Oh my God, you idiots. Oh, you idiots. Wake up. Wake up. Wake up. Stop blindly jumping onto whatever dick you can find in electoral politics. Like ever since Bernie Sanders dropped out, you have this mass of people that are just dying to find some other, person to save them. No one is coming to save you. Politicians are slimy, okay? You can't trust them. Especially not American ones. Okay? They all have a vested interest in maintaining the empire. And guess what? That hurts you as well. Instead of you getting Medicare for all, instead of getting a Green New Deal, instead of getting UBI, jobs program, anti-corruption, you get B-52s. You get a bunch of Predator drones. You get a bunch of Global Hawk drones. You get a bunch of military bases and aircraft carriers that you don't really need. So it hurts everyone. Okay? Easily tell apart candidates by checking the foreign policy. Because if they really have a spine, they'll stand up to the military-industrial complex, and not just that, but U.S. hegemony. They will challenge it, and I've yet to see one who actually does it. The only person that and again, you know what's so funny? You know what's so funny? When I was talking about this last time, some guy accused me of being a plant from the Dario Hunter campaign, and I had literally just learned of Dario Hunter like 2 hours ago. But because I'm not okay with regime change in my country, I'm a plant. Motherfucker, I don't even know who is in the Green Party and what is even happening there. How the fuck am I a plant? Is that a pun also? A plant for the Green Party? No, this is ridiculous. It's really ridiculous. Like, how dare you criticize the U.S. empire? How dare you? Clearly, you're spy. You've been drinking too much Russia Gate Kool-Aid. You know that?